4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Nonlinear graphical analysis methods applied to Apple stock. Developed with the add-ons of the Cantore Parabolic family.
By Corrado Cantore.
Figure 1. In this video, we illustrate the contents of the nonlinear graphical analysis methods and how to apply them with the add-ons for MetaStock, and in this regard, they are mainly applied to Apple stock. Following some steps illustrated in the video, we arrive at the tracing of graphs such as the one visible in the figure concerning the application of this method to the Apple stock with daily time frame. The figure shows indications of nonlinear graphical analysis based on the plotting of parabolic involutes on the chart of Apple stock and graphical algorithmic analysis based on the plotting of parabolic involutes on both the chart of the RSI indicator and the OBV indicator. Following this video, we will see how it is possible and also quite simple to trace these curves with the use of the add-ons I created for MetaStock. Meanwhile, let's see what parabolic involutes are and how they are easily traceable on MetaStock. To this end, we are opening Power Console and the NASDAQ 100 Daily Index chart. Figure 2. To apply parabolic involutes, it is advisable to customize the chart with these simple tricks. Remove the volume window, although later we may need the window of the on-balance volume indicator. For a clearer reading of the graph, we remove the vertical grid lines. Let's proceed to the formatting of the prices of the market in question in whole numbers. We reduce the amplitude of the time scale to the period of our interest, and finally, above all, we must define the scale of quotations as a manual scale and not as an automatic one. This is to be considered as an absolutely mandatory step. Following these customizations, the image of the NASDAQ 100 index looks like this. Figure 2 bis. Following these customizations, the new graph is visible in the figure, and now we can acquire the add-on of interest for the tracking of parabolic involutes. In this regard, we operate with the free Cantore Parabolic add-ons, in which the letter F stands for free. In the MetaStock functions window at the top, we find many add-ons of the Cantore Parabolic family for a total number of 9, 3 of which are free, many of which we will get to know later. Let's now operate on the Cantore Parabolic add-on by dragging it onto the market chart following the same simple method of using any MetaStock function. Figure 3. Following the opening of the Cantore Parabolic add-on, 6 windows are presented with default input data designed to operate on monthly time frame charts, and a red parabolic involute is automatically presented on the graph. It must be customized both in its graphic appearance and, above all, in its positioning on specific minimum or maximum points selected by the operator as its points of tangency on the chart of the financial market to which it is applied. The first 3 windows of the input box concern the dates of the 3 positioning points of the parabolic involute being traced. The 4th and 5th windows are functional for a slight upward or downward shift of the 2nd and 3rd points of tangency. Finally, the last window concerns some modes of graphic aspect inherent in the tracing of the parabolic involute in question. Let's reposition the 3 points of tangency of the parabolic involute being traced indicated with the numbers 1, 2, and 3 to obtain a parabolic involute actually tangent to important lows recorded by the NASDAQ 100 index from 2011 to 2019. Figure 4. The parabolic involute drawn on the default tangency points has been repositioned here so as to be tangent on the 3 points point A, point B, and point C, identified by the operator respectively on the lows formed in the years 2002. Minimum after the bursting of the internet bubble of 2000, 2009, minimum after the Lehman Brothers crack, and 2016, minimum after British Brexit. To assign these dates in the appropriate windows, you can operate by typing the dates directly, or if these dates have already been stored, for example in a Word document, you can proceed with the simple copy/paste mode. For a technical aspect of MetaStock inherent to the so-called floating point, the date windows can accommodate a maximum number of 7 numbers, but we will not go into this detail here. In the subsequent evolution, the Nasdaq 100 index formed 2 other lows, point D and point E, precisely on the transit of the parabolic involute in question, confirming the value of an important principle that since the 90s of the last century I have defined with the phrase principle of the long memory of parabolic involutes. More than 30 years have passed since the birth of this expression, and in this period, it has deployed its growing usefulness that we will learn about in part in the rest of the webinar. Let's proceed with our examination of the method of tracking parabolic involutes and their function in terms of operational trading and asset allocation. Let's take a look at the type of graphical indications that can be grasped from their application to the Microsoft stock in the defined mode of graphical algorithmic analysis, which concerns the application of parabolic involutes both to the chart of the market in question and to the charts of its RSI and OBV algorithmic indicators. Figure 5. An examination of the long-term performance of the Microsoft stock well illustrates the value of the principle of the long memory of parabolic involutes, which is clearly perceptible here, both on those applied to the chart of the stock itself and on those applied to its RSI and OBV algorithmic indicators. The application of parabolic involutes to the RSI indicator is described in the central box of the figures, while the one relating to the OBV indicator in its lower part. The reading of the behavior of the RSI indicator in relation to its parabolic support and resistance involutes allows you to grasp the change in sentiment taking place on the market, while that relating to the OBV indicator allows you to perceive the level of robustness of the current trend. We note in the figure the timely and clear signs of interruption of the trend at points A and B. The behavior of the Microsoft stock, which we see here well responding to the indications useful for asset allocation decisions, is equally interesting with operational trading decisions explained below. Let's now delve into the use of parabolic involutes with the add-ons of the Cantore Parabolic family applied to Apple stocks, initially with a monthly time frame, to gradually move on to reduced time frames, i.e. daily time frames, 30 and 10 minutes. Figure 6. After acquiring the chart of the Apple stock and specifying the time frame on a monthly basis, acquiring the Cantore Parabolic add-on automatically generates the default red-dashed parabolic involute, which is positioned on the monthly data of September 2011, January 2016, and May 2019. In many cases, these values are placed exactly on important points of market reversal to which the parabolic involute is applied. This finding is not as effective in the case at hand, as the parabolic involute thus traced does not intercept the actual evolution of Apple in the desired way. By moving the second point of tangency down by 18 points, i.e. $18, from point A to point B, the red parabolic involute is obtained, which is very effective in interpreting the subsequent evolution of the Apple stock. An equally effective indication is obtained with the tracing of the green parabolic involute. Let's now see how this procedure of tracing a parabolic involute is actually replicated in the transition from its tracing from the chart of the financial market in question to the chart of one of its algorithmic indicators, and in particular of the RSI indicator. Figure 7. To plot parabolic involutes on the chart of the RSI indicator, it is first necessary to create on the MetaStock chart the appropriate window to accommodate this chart. If anything, by plotting the original MetaStock RSI indicator with the relative strength index function and then replacing it in this window with the version created by the Cantore RSIF add-on. The positioning parameters of the Cantore RSIF indicator are based on the same dates of the Cantore F indicator seen previously relating to September 2011, January 2016, and May 2019, respectively used in the plotting of parabolic involutes on the financial market chart. The Cantore F add-on in the last window below has by default a frequency of 72 periods, equal to about 14 weeks of 5 days each. In the case in question, the frequency was reduced from 72 to 21 months, and the first 2 points of tangency were slightly repositioned in order to obtain interesting signals of a graphic order indicated by the red vertical lines of the type that we will get to. No better in the examination of the graphs with daily and intraday time frames. Figure 8. Following a graphic procedure substantially similar to that described for the tracing of parabolic involutes applied to the chart of the RSI indicator, it is possible to trace parabolic involutes to the chart of the OBV indicator, from which it is possible to perceive the level of robustness of the trend underway on the Apple stock. This overall representation of the technical picture of the Apple share, which we call Cantore Suite, has been traced all with the completely free add-ons of the Cantore F family, which the interested operator can use by accessing either the website of the author Corrado Cantore or the MetaStock website. Figure 9. Let us now verify the effectiveness expressed by some principles described so far on the basis of a graph with a monthly time frame applied now to a graph with a daily time frame and subsequently to graphs with an intraday time frame. The figure shows the best graphic representation of what has been examined so far on Apple stock with the transition from the use of a graph with a monthly time frame to a corresponding graph with a daily time frame. In the reproduction of charts with the application of different time frames, it may be necessary to reposition the date of positioning of one of the 3 points of the parabolic involute being traced because, in order for it to be plotted correctly, it must necessarily intercept a bar or a candle that has actually manifested itself on the market in question. We now spend brief comments in relation to another add-on prepared by the author, but at the moment not considered sufficiently ready and tested for its marketing. It concerns the graphic interpretation of the evolution, especially in the long term, of a financial market. We are talking about cubic Bezier curves. Figure 10. From a purely graphical point of view, there are interesting similarities in the interpretation of the graph of a financial market, especially in its long-term evolution, both in its interpretation on the basis of parabolic involutes, such as the green and red ones, and cubic Bezier curves such as the yellow and blue ones. The interpretation of the development of the Apple stock in the long term, in addition to being well perceivable with the use of the parabolic involutes of a dozen years previously seen in its representation with a monthly time frame, can be equally well perceptible with the tracing of nonlinear channels formed by 2 cubic Bezier curves. In many situations, the descriptive effect provided by these 2 important nonlinear graphical analysis tools, parabolic involutes and cubic Bezier curves, is almost similar, although the algorithmic contents underlying these 2 curves are profoundly different. The important aspect that distinguishes parabolic involutes from cubic Bezier curves concerns the fact that while the former are the result of an algorithmic expression that sees the development of time squared, in the construction of cubic Bezier curves, the expression of time is squared and cubed. Figure 11. The different algorithmic expressions underlying the parabolic involutes and the cubic Bezier curves are clearly evident in the figure, in which it can be observed that the blue parabolic involute is to all intents and purposes a parabola with a vertical axis suitably positioned on the Cartesian plane of the financial market in question, so as to be perfectly tangent to 3 points identified by the operator who uses it. The cubic Bezier curves, at least in the formulation adopted by the undersigned and transferred to the experimental MetaStock add-ons and used in the construction of these graphs, provide for the identification not of specific points of tangency, but of particular points on which lines are drawn, on which, in turn, the cubic Bezier curve being traced is positioned, again in a tangent mode. The first starting point of the cubic Bezier curves, also in the add-on in question, originates from the first datum of the financial market graph to which they are applied. Other attempts I have developed in this regard renounce this peculiarity. The final versions of the add-ons for the tracing of cubic Bezier curves may diverge from those currently in use at an experimental level. Having made these brief observations, let's now leave the cubic Bezier curves to return to the parabolic involutes. We hope to return soon to talk about the cubic Bezier curves in support of the nonlinear graphical analysis of financial markets. Figure 12. The long-term evolution of Apple's share price over 12 years has been affected by the development of a very regular support parabolic channel consisting of the green and red parabolic involutes. The presence of the red lower parabolic involute by Apple has been verified in its evolution in 6 different circumstances and indicated by the yellow circles. During 2025, Apple stock recorded a first corrective movement to the downward violation of the green upper parabolic involute, and this decline was accentuated by the subsequent violation of the red parabolic involute. From a purely graphic point of view, the decline in April 2025 is therefore to be interpreted as a manifestation of a situation of discontinuity of the positive trend that characterized Apple's evolution in the previous 12 years from 2012 to the beginning of 2025. The corrective movement in question was exhausted at the feedback of the support exerted by the pair of the 2 blue convex parabolic involutes. Figure 13. Let's see in more detail what is represented in the previous figure. As we have already seen, the corrective movement that affected all financial markets in reaction to the introduction of customs duties by the Trump administration was very rigorously signaled on the Apple stock by the violation of the green and red long-term parabolic involutes examined so far. An equally important signal of mere nonlinear graphic analysis reappeared with the formation of timely support exerted by the pair of turquoise and blue convex parabolic involutes, at the achievement of which the downturn was interrupted and a prompt positive reaction was initiated. The figure also plots the curve of a 200-day moving average, which will be re-examined later in terms of verifying the synergies that can be grasped by resorting to the methods of systematic technical analysis, conducted, for example, with moving averages, with the methods of discretionary technical analysis conducted with the application of parabolic involutes. Let's now take a step forward in terms of perception of the signaling contents of what is under consideration here by accessing the methods of algorithmic Cartistic analysis that concern the application of parabolic involutes to the graph of the RSI indicator and that of the OBV indicator. Figure 14. The first step to be taken for the application of graphical algorithmic analysis methods to the financial markets, which, as already noted, sees the tracing of parabolic involutes to the chart of one of its RSI indicators, concerns the preparation on the general chart on the screen of a special box, such as the one that MetaStock commonly proposes in the tracing of the RSI indicator with the relative strength index function. In this regard, two paths can be taken. The first sees the plotting of this specific MetaStock RSI indicator and then adapts it to accommodate the chart generated by the Cantore RSI add-on, while the second way directly concerns the plotting of this add-on. Following the second procedure, a graph of the type reproduced in the figure is created, and in both methods of proceeding, it is necessary to define the width of the vertical scale of the box in question, establishing, for example, a minimum value of 25 and a maximum value of 75. In this definition of the scale of the pane, it can be useful to customize the number of decimals by fixing the value of a single decimal for all the numbers that are presented. Figure 15. After having prepared in the lower part of the general MetaStock chart a window designed to accommodate the graph of the RSI indicator generated by the Cantore RSI add-on, we must now proceed with the acquisition of this add-on, which has 6 windows for the attribution of input data. The first 3 windows are reserved for the assignment of the dates of the 3 points of tangency of the parabolic involute being traced on the graph of the RSI indicator. The next 2 are reserved for possible slight upward or downward shifts of the second and third points, and finally the last window shows the frequency of the RSI indicator, which by default is equal to 72 periods, whether they are months, days, hours, fractions of 10 minutes, etc. The figure shows the signaling effectiveness expressed by the green parabolic involute both in terms of bullish indications, such as the very important one produced on June 6, 2024, and others that occurred subsequently with the formation of pullback by the RSI indicator on the green parabolic involute. As obvious as it is, you can plot as many parabolic involutes as you want both on the chart of the financial market and on the chart of its RSI indicator. Figure 16. With the sole purpose of illustrating the versatility of the add-ons of the Cantore family in the application of the methods of nonlinear graphic analysis and graphical algorithmic analysis, the figure shows the use of a considerable number of parabolic involutes applied both to the Apple chart and to the chart of its RSI indicator. In the upper part of the figure, in addition to the long-term support parabolic involutes of green and red dashes, there are also 2 cubic Bezier curves with yellow lines, very similar to these parabolic involutes. The joint use of both parabolic involutes and cubic Bezier curves allows us to grasp important graphic signals on the evolution of the market in question, as demonstrated here by their application to Apple share. The application of parabolic involutes on the chart of the RSI indicator allows important indications on the dominant sentiment taking place on the market. The last step to complete the graphical algorithmic analysis concerns the plotting of parabolic involutes on the chart of its on-balance volume indicator on the basis of which it is possible to perceive the level of robustness of the trend in progress. Let's see how. Figure 17. In principle, the method to be followed for the plotting of parabolic involutes on the chart of the OBV indicator aimed at the visual perception of the level of robustness of the trend taking place on the market, is rather similar to that described with regard to the use of the RSI indicator. More specifically, you must first draw the graph of the OBV indicator in a new box in the default mode proposed by MetaStock with the use of its on-balance volume. function, and then you must customize the vertical scale by dividing the values of the scale automatically generated in the plotting of the original OBV indicator by MetaStock by the fixed number of 1 million. We then proceed to the acquisition of the function of the Cantore OBV add-on, with which you can trace different parabolic involutes on this graph. The use of the tracing of two parabolic involutes positioned rather parallel to each other allows us to clearly perceive the actual evolution of volumes and, consequently, of the level of robustness of the current trend thus indicated. Figure 18. With what is described in the figure, the process required for the complete representation of the graphical algorithmic analysis methods concerning the plotting of parabolic involutes on the chart of the RSI indicator in order to perceive the dominant sentiment in progress, and others on the chart of the OBV indicator in order to perceive the level of robustness of the current trend ends. As of June 6th, 2024, the Apple stock has started a significant growth at the same time as the two turquoise and blue convex parabolic involutes are overcome with the crossing by the RSI indicator of the green resistance parabolic involute, and finally, also on that date, the OBV indicator also abandoned upwards the parabolic channel formed by the blue and red parabolic involute. The indications shown in the figure are conducted with the use of representations based on daily data. For this reason, they can be considered particularly useful in an application context in terms of asset allocation. We conclude this examination of the add-ons of the Cantore family by paying attention to the effectiveness they can express in their application on graphs with intraday timeframes, i.e. in their application in a real-time management context. Figure 19. The transposition of the nonlinear graphical analysis and graphical algorithmic analysis methods from end-of-day data to real-time data is quite simple and in fact only requires a different specification of the 3 points of tangency of the parabolic involute being plotted on the graph, plotted with a time frame lower than the daily one. As should have emerged from the previous comments, for the plotting of a parabolic involute on end-of-day graphs, it is necessary to specify the coordinates of 3 points in terms essentially of the respective dates. By specifying the dates of the 3 points of tangency of the parabolic involute being traced, the add-ons of the Cantore family acquire the closing values of the day and, operating on two other windows, as described in the left pane. You can raise or lower the values of the second and third points from the closing values assumed by default by the add-on. In the transposition of this method of data acquisition from end-of-day data to intraday data, it is necessary to add additional information on the exact minute on which the parabolic involute is to be placed. Having to take into account the availability of only 6 windows that MetaStock reserves for the construction of add-ons of the type of those under consideration here, it was necessary to resort to a particular artifice in the construction of add-ons for their application in real time. This artifice that I have currently adopted sees the attribution of only the daily date for the first point of tangency, the attribution of the date and fraction of the day for the second point of tangency, and finally the attribution of the date, the fraction of the day, and also the possibility of moving up or down the closing quotations of the bar concerned for the third point of tangency. In a real-time operation with MetaStock RT, it is possible to simultaneously draw on the same graph a series of parabolic involutes, with the Cantore add-on inherent to parabolic involutes on DC data and others with a Cantore RT add-on inherent to parabolic involutes on RT data. The same criterion for the use of add-ons proposed to operate on DC data and others designed to operate on RT data can be borrowed on the RSI and OBV indicators. obtaining a complete representation as illustrated in the following figure. Figure 20. While for an operation with end-of-day data, the operator can use both the add-ons of the Cantore Parval family offered free of charge, Cantore Parval F, Cantore Parval RSIF, and Cantore Parval OBVF, and also the following proposals in professional version, Cantore Parval and Cantore Parval RSI and Cantore Parval OBV, for an operation with real-time data, can only use the professional add-ons Cantore Parval RT and Cantore Parval RSIRT and Cantore Parval OBVRT without any free real-time version. The reason for this choice is very simple and reasonable. It is based on the fact that before operating in real time with the methods of nonlinear graphic analysis and graphical algorithmic analysis, it is advisable to have due experience in their applications on end-of-day data and then move on to operate in a real-time environment. Figure 21. What is illustrated in the previous figure regarding the application of graphical algorithmic graphic analysis methods to graphs with 30-minute intraday timeframes can in fact be replicated with any time fraction available on MetaStock. The figure illustrates its application to Apple stock with a 10-minute time frame. It is not considered necessary here to enter into the detailed description of the graph in favor of two last observations concerning the synergies that can be achieved between the use of linear graphic analysis tools and nonlinear graphic analysis tools, and between systematic technical analysis methods with others of discretionary technical analysis conducted with parabolic involutes used in various capacities as described here. Figure 22. While paying specific attention throughout the work to the theme of nonlinear graphic analysis, it must nevertheless be noted that this type of analysis is highly effective when it is placed in relation to the basic indications emerging from the more common linear graphic analysis. The joint and systematic use of these two analysis methods allows the development of a simple, but at the same time very profitable, short-term trading activity based precisely on the indications that the two analysis methods can propose if used simultaneously. More specifically, this simple trading method sees the opportunity to open a long or short position when a parabolic involute is exceeded or violated with the intention of closing it when a trend line is reached that we define as similar to the parabolic involute concerned. By way of example, the figure shows the occurrence of this opportunity for a downward operation to be opened to the violation of the blue parabolic involute at the point indicated with the letter X, which also coincides with the violation of the yellow 200-day moving average in dashes, with the intention of closing it when the yellow trend line drawn on points AB is reached, relating to the second and third positioning points of the blue parabolic involute. For this reason, the yellow trend line is defined with the term similar to the parabolic involute just violated. It is objectively very simple, but if it is applied systematically day after day, it presents itself in a very fruitful way. Upon reaching the target identified by the trend line at point Y, the trader must assess whether the bearish excursion is to be considered over or not when this target is reached. In the first case, the short operation is closed by taking the due profit from the price excursion from point X to point Y. In the other case, profits are allowed to run with the intention of identifying a new price target based on nonlinear graphical analysis methods. In this second case, the transit of a turquoise support parabolic involute is expected, point Z at which the rebound has manifested itself, with consequent closing signals with good profit from the downward operation. It is a very simple and very profitable operation that can be easily implemented on all financial markets by relying on the operational signals emerging from the joint use of linear and nonlinear graphical analysis methods. Figure 23. The dynamics of the Microsoft stock well illustrates the occurrence of two situations of opportunity to resort to trading operations based on the search for the trend line akin to a parabolic involute based on the search to systematically grasp that movement that normally occurs on a financial market from the violation/overcoming of a parabolic involute to the achievement of a trend line similar to the parabolic involute just violated. The rationale of this operation is objectively simple, easily understood, and is based on the fact that, normally, in a corrective situation of a market, the closing of a downward position is aimed by a large population of traders at the achievement of a trend line that can be easily identified with the simplest methods of basic technical analysis. With the systematic use of parabolic involutes, it is possible to grasp the signal of opening the position upwards or downwards in advance and profit from this gap that normally occurs on the financial markets in intraday, but also multi-day operations. Figure 24. The methods of nonlinear graphic analysis and graphical algorithmic analysis are not to be interpreted as totally independent methods, but rather as valid methods of graphical analysis that integrate synergistically with methods of a purely algorithmic nature, such as, by way of example, the common moving averages that are the basis of algorithmic or systematic technical analysis. In this way, the nonlinear graphical analysis methods allow you to define levels of objectives, upwards or downwards, that a financial market can likely achieve when an algorithmic analysis signal occurs, such as, for example, the common overcoming of a moving average or its violation. As an example, the figure shows the identification of a bullish price target indicated by point E that Apple stock could probably easily reach based on the indication of algorithmic analysis based on the overcoming of the 200-day moving average at the point indicated by the letter D. Point E is determined on the continuation of the concave turquoise parabolic involutes at the achievement of which it is reasonable to expect either an exhaustion of the movement at that moment in progress or its acceleration in the presence of their convincing overcoming. A very similar situation, albeit of the opposite sign, is represented by the corrective movement from point F to point G. The first is also determined in this case by the moving average violation at point F, and the corrective action extends to the achievement of the support exerted by the convex parabolic involutes at point G. Figure 25. In order to encourage the use of nonlinear graphical analysis and graphical algorithmic analysis methods together with MetaStock, I am pleased to offer completely free 2 other add-ons for the tracking of exponential involutes, which are particularly effective in the graphical interpretation of markets with exponential growth or decline. The first add-on, called Cantore Expo Trend, is designed to operate with end-of-day data, while the second Cantore Expo Trend RT add-on is designed to operate with real-time data. They have 2 modes of their representation, one of which is very simple and one slightly more articulated. The simplest way to use it is the one shown in the figure and essentially concerns the tracing of a red exponential involute and the blue trend line with dashes. Both of these graphical tools are positioned on the 2 points selected by the placement operator of the exponential involute being plotted. On the basis of the 2 selected points indicated by the red rectangles, and with the application of an appropriate correction or curvature factor, The exponential involute being traced is able to interpret in a rather clear and convincing way the growth phase of the Apple stock from 2020 onwards. It was precisely the violation of this exponential involute that led to the corrective action to be taken in relation to the announcement of the new customs duties by U.S. President Donald Trump. The figure shows the appreciable signaling content that the exponential involutes can offer, but above all the simplicity of their application to the graph of the financial market in question emerges since, for this purpose, it is sufficient to identify 2 points of its placement on the Cartesian plane and attribute to the exponential involute being traced the appropriate bending factor. In order to create a curve characterized by a growth of an effectively exponential type, but always transiting on the 2 points of the Cartesian plane selected by the operator. The video ends here thanks to the attention paid to following it.